Do you read? Probably. But you're probably not reading The High Republic. No one is.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Star Wars has a problem. The fans have left. We've covered the films and the merchandise extensively, but there's one element of Star Wars we haven't covered in a while, and well, it's time. In February of 2020, Disney Lucasfilm released a 4-minute preview video on YouTube for the company's next major Star Wars project, The High Republic. The massive publishing-oriented project would set out to tell sweeping, interconnected epic stories across a series of comics, novels, and magazines, all set 200 years before the events of the original films. The fan response was varied, but a sizable portion of it seemed unenthusiastic. Combine this with a preview of art that featured a cast of heroes ranging from masculine women to feminine men to a literal rock, throw in the obligatory female of color, Jedi Knight sporting a gender studies head shave, and it would seem that the fan skepticism was well earned. It appeared that this new epoch of the formerly beloved franchise would be one long writer-projected struggle session. Then, ahead of release of the first wave of novels, there was the sterling promotional work by the infamous Justina Ireland. Ireland, a celebrated traditionally published author, had bylines on 6 titles in the High Republic franchise. She is a woman of strong liberal conviction and isn't shy about making them known, either in her public life or in the material she writes. If nothing else, one has to give her credit for being upfront with the potential audience. If you don't like her politics, then you're not going to want to buy the product, and that was excellent messaging that has definitely been effective in the past. It seemed all the pieces were in place for this brave new era of storytelling in the Star Wars universe to unfold. The old EU was jettisoned, the new sequel movies were in place, and comics, graphic novels, and books aimed at adult, young adult, and middle grade readers were set to be launched in a new era with no Sith and characters that looked as if they came right out of a Tumblr fanfic blog. As the internet meme goes,
it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So 2 years on, how are things going for the galaxy's least heteronormative entry in the franchise after $1 billion in a marketing campaign? Well, let the book scan figures speak for themselves. The first novel, Star Wars The High Republic, Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, sold 119,000 copies. Star Wars The High Republic, Storm Rising, sold 59,000 copies. Star Wars The High Republic, The Fallen Star, sold 35,000 copies. And the final book in the first wave of the novel sold 13,000. The young adult numbers don't fare much better. We'll leave the image on screen so you guys can check that out. Obviously, one can easily see that the numbers drop as time goes on, but let's take a closer look. The runaway success of the bunch is Charles Soule's The Light of the Jedi, the first High Republic book to be released. It boasted a total of 158,000 copies sold across hardcover and paperback formats to date. The title cast a long shadow across the sales spreadsheet. Not a single title release in Phase 1 even came remotely close. Each subsequent release in the novel series falls off precipitously. You'll notice a distinct pattern as we go along. A series' initial release tends to be its bestseller, with sales roughly halving with each following title, no matter the audience. Let's fast forward to Phase 2 novel's release and compare, shall we? As expected, the first release of this phase, Convergence, sold a mere 21,000 copies. Battle of Jedha sold 8,524 copies, and Cataclysm sold 9,723 copies. This is the sorry state of a franchise that not long ago commanded legions of rabid fans whose novels moved 6-figure sales without breaking too much of a sweat. How did the young adult novels fare? For Phase 1, Into the Dark, released in February of 2021, sold 58,249 copies. Out of the Shadows, released July of 2021, sold half of that at 22,539 copies. And Midnight Horizon sold 21,723 copies. A box set of all 3 titles has to date sold 503 units. Let's stop that for a minute, folks. Me, one guy on the internet, my first comic stealing solo sold roughly 4 times this amount? Yes, my own independent comic book where we kidnap Harrison Ford and force him to remake Star Wars in our basement sold 4 times what an officially released Star Wars novel did. That's terrible. That's not to take away my achievement here, but I'm just a guy on the internet with a channel. This is Star Wars with Disney money behind it. Makes me feel better, but holy shit is this embarrassing for them. In summary, this is a 90 to 95% drop in sales between the launch of Light of the Jedi and the current High Republic novel in barely over 2 years. Please observe that the children's book line has gone away. Some of these books don't even have paperbacks. And folks, we've been finding them on clearance already. Check out the footage in front of you. These are numbers for one of the biggest IPs in history, if one of the biggest publishing markets with one of the biggest promotional pushes behind it in recent memory. It is truly a dead brand, and bittersweet, though it can be to express the thought, it deserves to be. The High Republic universe is set in a time so far back it bears no resemblance to what fans are familiar with. It is functionally a skin suit strategy. Between the removal of the stories in the classic extended universe, Disney put the finishing touches on one of its grandest failures. The decision to have it take place during a period of peace and prosperity in the Republic speaks to the creatively stunted minds behind the effort who fear tension, who don't have the life experience to write conflict, and are too busy making sure to push bland characters whose most significant traits are immutable physical characteristics. The big bad of this flavorless tripe is a group called the Nil, who amount to nothing more than a band of raiders, the most generic possible antagonist. The announcement trailer even goes as far as to refer to them as Space Vikings, which is probably the sum of all creative efforts likely put into them. It may even be insulting to Vikings. Contrast that with the treatment of the original trilogy as source material for Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy. Released in 1991 and set 5 years after the events in Return of the Jedi, his novels, Heir to the Empire, Dark Forces Rising, and The Last Command have gone on to sell a lot. How much is a lot? The original Thrawn trilogy sold over 15 million copies as of 2014, and then after that, the Star Wars Extended Universe was jettisoned by Disney and Kathleen Kennedy. It went on to sell 5 million more copies. A new box set of the original Thrawn trilogy released in May of 2022 has sold 13,000 copies by itself. In the book The Secret History of Star Wars by Michael Kaminsky, the writer credits the Thrawn trilogy with rekindling public interest in the Star Wars franchise after it had faded following the release of Return of the Jedi in 1983. According to Kaminsky, it is possible that this renewed interest was a factor in George Lucas's decision to create the prequel trilogy. In a 2014 interview, Timothy Zahn, the writer of the trilogy, said, "Nobody knew whether these books were going to sell. I remember sitting around one day trying to figure out how many libraries there are in the US, and if they'll all buy 2 copies and how many we can sell. We had to earn out this book, and as we know, Star Wars fans were simmering there below the surface, and they just boiled up as soon as there was something to grab onto, and they've been going strong ever since." Funny what happens when you write stories that appeal to fans, isn't it? And the reality of the dismal sales figures isn't restricted to the High Republic books. Since Disney's takeover of the property, only 4 books have broken 100,000 copies in sales, besides the aforementioned Light of the Jedi. 3 of them were written by Zahn. The 5th and final was the first Chuck Wendig novel, whose sales wibbled and wobbled their way into a ditch with each of his titles following aftermath. We won't even go into the number for Zahn's Thrawn books written post-Disney, but the 5 of them have easily outsold every High Republic novel, and the 6th is only outsold by Light of the Jedi. How does the High Republic match up in terms of fan reaction? Delilah Dawson, author of the Disney similarly gloomed Galaxy's Edge novel, didn't have a single signing or sale at DragonCon. Meanwhile, this was at Timothy Zahn's table. Let's crunch some numbers. Zahn's non-Star Wars books, including the Cobra series and his new Icarus series, have outsold all of the High Republic novels but Light of the Jedi. The same is true from other former Star Wars Expanded Universe authors, such as Kevin J. Anderson's Dune novels or Michael Stackpole's Battletech novels. Pick a well-known science fiction author. They've had a book or two outsell the High Republic novels over the past couple of years. And not one of the authors had a billion-dollar marketing campaign behind it that Disney gave the High Republic. 2 months ago, titles were announced for Phase 3. Releases for young adult novels and middle-grade audiences were notably absent. Whew, those are some harsh words from upstream. With characters like Slate and Ram Jamaram, are you surprised that 95% of the audience left? How could anyone spin these numbers? The writers hired to create this universe have a pretty crappy attitude that really rubs readers the wrong way. That and their work is actually shit. What is Lucasfilm thinking? Will this finally get them to realize their diversity-first agenda killed Star Wars? No, they don't care. More Rey, more High Republic, more garbage. Disney wants their companies to be profitable, but with dwindling sales, how long until the bottom drops out? The upcoming Acolyte is going to be based on this new era of Star Wars, and readership has abandoned the ship after reading the first book. You can generate hype for one book with $1 billion campaign, but after the people read it, they left. Quickly. The future isn't bright for Star Wars, but that doesn't mean they're going to stop making bad content anytime soon, because it's all about the politics of the writer, not the quality of the content or what the audience wants to read. Now, I am not surprised by any of this. To be completely honest, I'm not surprised that 95% of people have left Star Wars, because we've been covering this ever since Disney took over, and you could just tell there was something off. You could smell it in the air. Phil Collins wrote a song about it, you know what it would be called. It's like that old Dr. Evil joke, why make billions when you could make millions? Well, Star Wars is like, why sell millions of books when you could sell under 100,000 copies? That's the Disney mantra. That's the Lucasfilm mantra of today. Whatever Kathleen Kennedy's trying to build for this future generation, the future generation isn't here for it, and the people that like Star Wars don't like this, so they're not going to introduce their kids to it. It's easy to follow. People don't want the Acolyte to come out. They're already livid with the show. They hope it gets canceled. They're desperate for it to not exist. Why? Because everything from Disney Star Wars has sucked for a long time. We're on almost year 8 of this. The Force Awakens was released in December of 2015. It is 2023. Every outlet wants to make excuses. It's the fans, people don't read, they blame their phones, this, that, and the other, but no. 5 million copies since Disney took over have sold of the Thrawn trilogy? The world hasn't changed that much since Disney took over that people weren't using their cell phones or didn't have social media back then. So don't give me that excuse. There really is an excuse. There's just one answer. There can be only one. It's not good content. It's not good Star Wars. Folks, across the board, it's not just Star Wars. If a brand delivers crap for so long, people aren't going to show up. Look at the Star Wars Galactic Battlecruiser. Nobody went to that thing because it's based on the Rey trilogy and people don't like it. Beyond the fact that it was $5,000 for just 2 nights of a really crappy experience, people didn't show up. If it was spend a night on the Death Star, that thing would still be running. If it was spend a night on the Millennium Falcon, that thing would still be running. You don't understand. The original trilogy is what made Star Wars what it is, and the prequel trilogy, which isn't that bad, it furthered that. But this new one is so bad that it brought the 2 generations of the prequels and the original trilogy together to realize that this 3rd trilogy is the outlier. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Well, it's this. It's the Disney Star Wars. And it's so expensive. $1 billion to promote one book. One book. They spent more money to promote that book than they did to make some of these movies. The Disney Star Wars trilogy cost at least $400 million per picture. The book, another $1 billion to promote. It's a bottomless hole. How many Baby Yoda dolls can they keep people buying to funnel this bullshit? At some point it has to stop, and I thought it would have stopped by now. The High Republic is a joke. It's always been a joke, and its sales numbers are a joke. Like I said in the video, I can't believe that I outsold the High Republic. Stealing Solo has sold more copies than that box set of those 3 titles. That makes me feel good. That makes me feel wonderful. But it also makes me confused as to how Star Wars is so bad. Back in the day, even the worst Star Wars was still a good experience. Now, don't even get me started. I'd rather watch other sci-fi, Dune 2, other things like that. The new one with John David Washington. There's good sci-fi out there, folks. The genre is alive and well, and it's growing. So check out independent artists like me and other people out there who make comics, write novels, make music, whatever we want to do. The independent scene is only called independent because it doesn't have $1 billion promotion behind it. But we can all produce quality work that's better than what you get officially. Have you ever heard me go on about my personal politics? I don't care what you believe. Buy my books. I don't care who you vote for. Watch our shows. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to tell you anything like that because we're all grateful to have an audience. We're not here to put our audience in place. So folks, I want to thank you guys for watching this video. I'll only ask one thing. Well, a few things actually. First off, hit that thumbs up button to let YouTube know that you enjoyed this content. Hit the subscribe button to get more of the content for yourself. And if you feel so inclined and you want even more content, because sometimes more is actually more, go over to patreon.com, join the World Class Bullshitters Patreon page, and check that out. For $5 a month, you get exclusive access to all sorts of content, and well, it's thousands of hours of a back catalog, and you guys can request new things all the time. You can come on the show, hang out with us. It's all up to you. But here's the thing I'm always going to ask the most of you. Be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other. And I firmly believe that if Disney was excellent to the audience, people would be more willing to go out and try these new things. But you never want to support an asshole, and that's what happened with Disney. Have a good one, folks. Thanks for watching today's video. Yes, it's over, but don't cry because there's more, a lot more from World Class Bullshitters. And there's only one way to get it. Hit that subscribe button below. When you do that, you'll get notifications and updates from World Class Bullshitters every time we go live. Basically, you won't miss anything. And if there's one thing I hate, it's FOMO. But the thing most people hate more than FOMO is fear of missing out on World Class Bullshitters because there's just some things you can't undo. So folks, do yourselves a favor and never miss anything from World Class Bullshitters. One last thing before you go, hit the thumbs up button. Not for our egos, no, they're big enough as this, but it does help us fight the algorithm here, and well, it's man versus machine, and that's the real fight. But if that's not your battle, that's okay. There's one last way you can help WCBS, and that's going over to shopwcbs.com, picking up a t-shirt, a beer glass, a sweatshirt, a poster, all sorts of ways to back WCBS. The difference between us and other YouTube channels is I'm the artist that makes all this stuff, so if you enjoy art beyond t-shirts, you can even read our comic books. We got it all. We're called the epitome of pop culture for a reason, and no, again, it's not for our egos. So folks, make sure you're involved with every aspect of World Class Bullshitters, not just for us, but do it for yourself. We're making the change in entertainment everybody out there wants to see. And a special thank you goes out to all of our wonderful patrons who make this content possible. Go to patreon.com/worldclassbs to get involved and help out the channel.